Welcome everyone. This event today is the first one we have as part of our Big Give campaign. Our campaign is called This Beekeeper Can, and all our events are focused on beekeeping within the context of disability, but also groups that are marginalized. And this is because we want to showcase the projects that we as Bees Abroad are doing throughout Africa with such groups, and we want to showcase the impact that beekeeping can have in bettering the lives of these communities. We're very lucky to have with us today Justin Ruger, who himself has focused on inclusive and accessible beekeeping in the US. He will be sharing with us, the history of accessible beekeeping and his story, as well as what he's doing as part of his charity to make beekeeping more accessible. I am Katerina, CEO of Bees Abroad. I will be hosting the event, and we have with us Nikki Bacchus, who will also be facilitating the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So I'll stop sharing. Over to you, Justin, if you'd like to share your screen. Perfect. Yeah, off you go.
Sorry. Hello all. As Katerina said, my name is Justin Ruger. I am a founder of the nonprofit Accessible Beekeeping in the United States. And one of the talks that I love to give is Beekeeping for All, Empowering Accessibility in Beekeeping. I'm going to give a little background about my education, how I got into accessible beekeeping, and where this all started, and then I'll get into accessible beekeeping itself. So I had no plans of being a beekeeper. When I grew up, I was into technology. I started with a computer science and computer engineering degree. I got a master's in applied physics, and then I started my nuclear physics PhD in 2015, and that led to, during break, I had a car accident, which led to seizures and a traumatic brain injury, which then led to a stroke in October 2020. And then I had a seizure and a fall in this last year that led to vision impairment. And I never wanted to be a beekeeper. I never thought about beekeeping, but it has brought a lot of joy and life back into my life after my previous plans were interrupted by this car accident. So how did beekeeping get started? I was, my late aunt, she passed away from COVID. She suggested that I write a children's book that taught her grandchild about honeybees. So in October of 2021, I published Henry Meets a Honeybee. And in May of 2022, I did Honey Teaches Beekeeping to Kids and Honey Teaches Beekeeping. The kids one is more for elementary school, and then Honey Teaches Beekeeping is more for older ages. And I have a lot of spouses that buy the book so that they can understand what their partners are doing. I went to Hive Life in Tennessee in 2022, and I met people such as Frederick Dunn and Terry Chapman and John Hill. These are all big names in the United States in beekeeping, and they gave me the nonprofit motivation to start a nonprofit. And I originally wanted to do beekeeping for children, but there was a lot of red tape for getting hives into schools and the safety and everything that I did not want to take a chance at, causing any issues for children that might be allergic. So I started a different nonprofit called Accessible Beekeeping, because I myself had broken back from my car accident, seizures, a stroke, some weakness on my side. And what we do at Accessible Beekeeping is we use research, design, and implementation to make beekeeping accessible. We try to network similar disabilities, and what that means is if someone has blindness or is deaf or weakness on one side, they can reach out to a beekeeper who's blind or a beekeeper who's deaf, and they can see that you can still be a beekeeper regardless of what you're going through. So there's our link for our nonprofit down at the bottom. I don't know if you were listening to the beginning, but we did the first exploratory survey of beekeeping and disabilities in the United States. This is some of the things that we have done. Dr. Brian Wentz from Shippensburg University in Pennsylvania. We did publish the paper, and you can visit our website to read it. We found that out of 512 respondees, nearly about 50% of them said that they had a disability, and 86% of the 50, I think it was like 42%, 86 of those said that disabilities hindered or stopped them from being beekeepers. And that was showing us that there is room for growth in accessible beekeeping and Bees Abroad and all of these charities and nonprofits that work to put accessible beekeeping into the hands of those that want to be beekeepers but think that it's not possible. We work on beekeeping education for all ages, from children to adults. We do conference breakout sessions and talks, such as the one that we're doing right now. And we do, as I said before, research, design, implementation of accessible hardware, software, and ideals for accessible beekeeping. One of the things that I personally am running from Accessible Beekeeping is Be My Hive Inspector, which is a mobile app that uses artificial intelligence to help with hive inspections. And we're also working with universities and companies to grow accessible equipment and practices. I'll show at the end, when I stop sharing my screen, the glove that we made with Guardian Bee Apparel that helps someone who's paralyzed on the right side. We've worked with Purdue University and the University of Florida Honeybee Lab on frame grabbers and different types of hardware that are not on the market right now. So we started with a learning and experimental apiary, and what we do with our apiary is we work with accessible hive solutions. When these companies give us these hives, we are being unbiased. We're trying to say, you know, we love your product, but this is how we can make it more accessible to those that might need modifications. And it's also meant to be motivation through the YouTube channel, that people can come to it and say, hey, I'm in a wheelchair, or I have vision impairment, or I have PTSD, and I want to still be a beekeeper. And they can see that somebody is doing it, and it allows them to feel like it's possible no matter what they're going through. So Be My Hive Inspector is the app that I'm working on, and the iOS alpha and Android alpha are both under testing right now. When I said that I had a visual impairment, the black is what I don't see, and the grayish color is what I do see. So it cut out a lot of the usable vision that I have. And I do have a video here that should play in the next slide. So it detects larvae and eggs and things of that nature. So for a blind beekeeper, it does have an option to read out to you what it is detecting, so they can use it to actually do their hive inspections. Because there's a blind beekeeper in California that I'm working with to test this, and she's 100% blind. And what she has to do is she has to have her husband or take pictures of her hive and send them to a sighted beekeeper, and the sighted beekeeper will tell her the state of her hive. And I wanted to not cut out the middleman, but help her be a little more independent in her beekeeping journey. So one of the things that everybody's always looking for and having trouble with is queen finding capabilities. So we're currently collecting more photos to train the model on detecting the queen inside a hive. And this is the Android version that, you know, the box follows the queen, as an awesome video that was sent to me of a queen actually laying eggs, which I had not seen up until this video was sent to me, and I thought it was one of the coolest things ever. So Be My Hive Inspector, you know, can find queens, it can find worker brood, queen cells, drone brood, capped honey, uncapped honey, eggs and larvae. I do need to check to see if I know it's able to be tested in the United States, but one of the things that I want to do after this is make sure that it can be utilized in the UK and other countries, since Bees Abroad was so nice to have me to give this talk today. So one of the things that I wanted to show is that we are accepting more pictures to train the model. You can see the training annotations, which I went through and I said, this is what's on this frame. And on the right side, the model predictions are what the model actually found. So you can see in the top left of training annotations and model predictions that I did queen cells, and it did pretty good selecting the queen cells out. The middle one in the bottom, you can see that it detected varroa mites, but it did miss on the third row down all the way to the right. I put in there that there was a varroa mite on the honeybee, but it missed it during its model prediction. So the only way that we can make this model better is using more pictures and doing more training.
Amazing.
So there is accessible beekeeping history, and this is part of what got me into giving talks, was because I was really intrigued in how the history of beekeeping has been used for accessibility reasons. So the three things that brought a lot of passion into my accessible beekeeping was Francois Hubert in 1792, the United States after World War I, and Slovenian Beekeepers Association, and I'll go into more depth on the next few slides. So Francois Hubert was a blind Swiss entomologist specializing in honeybees. He used his wife and his manservant to be the sighted beekeeper that helped him do his inspections. And it was amazing to me that he was a blind Swiss entomologist, and some of the discoveries that he made in between his lifespan of 1750 to 1831 was that the queen does not mate in the hive. He confirmed that bees are able to convert eggs into queens using royal jelly, that they communicate using antennas. And what he did of the figure on the right-hand side is he used the folio hive, which is the ancestor to our modern day observation hive. And each part of that folio hive was a frame with a window on each side of it. So when he put it together in the middle figure 2, it worked as a normal hive, but he was able to separate them in figure 3 and observe each hive, each individual frame, without disturbing the bees. And it allows them to make these amazing discoveries. And it proves to me, and hopefully to you guys, that even if you are blind or PTSD or any disability or limitation that you may have, you can still make amazing discoveries through hard work and determination and the ability and the process that we are trying to make for accessibility. Another thing that I found that actually was centered around the United States was in 1919, beekeeping was used as a vocation for veterans that came back from World War I. A lot of veterans in our history classes were taught that veterans were lost and confused. They had shell shock, which is now known as PTSD. And what the United States did is they put out a vocational training for beekeeping, that each state had a location that veterans could go to and learn about beekeeping and like what is its honey and uses. How the wax was used during the war. I didn't know that it was used to coat equipment to prevent rust and make things waterproof. And it also gave freedom from sugar rations, because it was rationed during the war, and honey was used as a supplemental sweetener. So before Bees Abroad and I came along, the United States was already seeing the power and the ability of beekeepers to make a difference in the world around us. Another association over on your side of the water was Slovenia, and it's one of the leading European Union countries in number of beekeepers per capita. They designed the Slovenian AZ hive, and they made a beekeeping manual for disabled persons in 2018. And they also published a paper on beekeeping as a therapy for individuals with mental disability. I do have that on our website in the forum location, so you can go and read all these documents if you're interested. So how do we make beekeeping accessible? We've given you history, we've given you part of my journey, but how do we make it accessible? So it starts before you even get in the hive, and how you wear and what you wear. You know, most people think of back braces as heavy lifting, but when you think about it, all the twisting and lifting that beekeepers do makes it a heavy lifting practice. So you can use back braces, wrist braces, supportive shoes. So it starts in can you see this? Okay, so this is the glove that was made by Guardian Bee Apparel in Georgia for a paralyzed veteran, and he couldn't get his hand into the 5 fingers because of the way it was curved. So we worked with Guardian Bee Apparel to make this mitt, and that's another example of accessible beekeeping starts with wearables. Now, whether you're a disabled or able-bodied beekeeper, you have to worry about transporting equipment. And a lot of people don't think that a garden hoe can be used for beekeeping, but thinking outside the box, which is what we're doing in accessible beekeeping, a garden hoe can be used for moving equipment out of the back of a truck, or moving things around when you can't reach it without having to jump up and get out of a truck, or you have other options so simple as a hand cart or dolly to cart the equipment around. And you have fancier equipment like the top right, which is the beehive carrier. It does require 2 people, but it removes the strain of the beehive on itself. Then we get into more fancier equipment, which is the manual beehive lifter, which is the bottom left one, and the sides of it hook into the handles, and you're able to crank it up. And the beauty of this equipment is that you can, if you're doing your inspections on the brood chambers, you can lift up all 3 or 4 honey supers at one time and get into the brood chambers, and then put the hives right back where they were. One of the issues that I'm working with different companies on is the cost. Cost has always been a limitation for people that need accessible options. I mean, if you're in a wheelchair and you've had a power wheelchair, you know that they can cost anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 just to get what you need. And that is an issue with accessible equipment, and finding ways to get it cheaper is one of the things that I'm trying to do as a nonprofit as well. And why I brought up the price was the Hummer Bee Apiary Orchard forklift is great for commercial for somebody that might have the money, but a hobbyist would struggle to be able to afford something as fantastic as the Hummer Bee Apiary forklift. So let's talk about some of the hive solutions that are currently on the market. We have the Langstroth hive, which most people are well aware of when they get into beekeeping. There's the Slovenian Aja hive, a horizontal hive, top bar hive, a Lane's hive, and a Parkinson hive. So we're kind of going to go through the pros and cons of each hive. You know, if you know anything about the history of Langstroth, you know that in 1851, It was designed by Lorenzo Langstroth, and it's amazing because it handles bee space, it's interchangeable and has readily available equipment, and it's known for its high honey production, which is why you find it a lot in commercial situations. But the cons of it is the weight. That is one of the major issues with the Langstroth system for accessible beekeeping is honey supers can weigh up to 70 to 100 pounds, depending on if you're using an 8 to 10 frame system. The inspections are invasive, and you need to have a large storage requirement for unused equipment, which might not be easier for the hobbyist beekeeper. The Slovenian AZ hive, it works like a bookshelf. So the back of it shuts, and you interact with the hive from the back of the hive, and it has screens that shut off the top and the bottom. And this is just a 2-story one. They do have 3 and 4-story ones. And the practices of the Slovenian Aja hive is that you have one brood chamber, and the rest of it is for honey production. But why is this a good hive to use? It's less stress on the bees. You're lifting roughly 6-pound frames multiple times rather than boxes. It's possible higher honey yields depending on how many brood chambers you allow the bees to have and where you input the queen excluder. And it's designed to inspect each level individually. The cons of it is that you need a bee house, and that traditional Aja frames are not compatible with Langstroth. So there is a company in North America, and if you're in the UK, you can also reach out to Slovenia, which what they did in Virginia is they traveled to Slovenia, they crafted and worked with manufacturers there to build an Aja hive that fits traditional Langstroth frames that you can use with a traditional extractor. A company in North Carolina, Horizontal Bees, I went to the conference with them and they were showing me their horizontal hives. And I told them that one of the issues that I was having with the horizontal hive is reaching over the hive to be able to lift the frames straight up. So they designed this tilting horizontal hive, and his wife was nice enough to paint a gnome for me with holding my book, which I thought was adorable. But the pros of a horizontal hive is once you get the horizontal hive situated, it is heavy to move it, but there's no heavy lifting, easier hive inspections, and less equipment. The con of using some of these accessible options is there's limited space. Because of the limited space, because you can't grow it like a Langstroth system, you have to do more frequent inspections, and there's less resources compared to Langstroth because there's some beekeepers out there, I don't know if you've seen pictures, that have 8 Langstroth boxes stacked high up, and you only have a limited space for doing your inspections with the horizontal hive. Another option that I know Bees Abroad likes to use is the top bar hive when they do their work in Africa. The beauty of a top bar hive is it has lower startup costs because it can be built by yourself. It's easier on the back and body, and it's fairly non-invasive inspections. And the way that the bees build their comb is similar to nature's way in a tree hive. And top bar beekeepers that are passionate about a top bar hive notice that bees build smaller comb, which they say can help with pest control, such as varroa mites and small hive beetles. One of the cons that I noticed is that since Langstroth and horizontal Langstroths are more popular on the market, it's difficult to find a mentor. And there's specific techniques for handling bars, especially at the newer wax comb, because if you tilt the frame, if you tilt the top bar, not the frame, if you tilt the top bar in a certain way, you have the risk of the comb falling off. There is a chance of less honey production, and it uses non-standardized parts. So you can't walk into your local beekeeping store and buy bars as you can go and buy Langstroth frames. One of the new hives that we have in our apiary and experimental apiary is the Layens hive. The pros of Layens hive is its effective insulation means less honey consumption during the winter times. It's cheaper than Langstroth. It's a higher startup cost, but you don't have to keep buying boxes and frames. It's easy to inspect because once again, you're only using one frame at a time rather than heavier boxes. And it's less invasive to the hive than moving whole boxes. The cons is there's, like Top Bar Hive, fewer mentors. Once you have it situated, it's difficult to move. And since the frames are a double deep and a half, as you can see in the picture, you have to crush and strain to extract your honey, and there's no additional space. So once you have to do more inspections to make sure that your bees are not running out of space and you have a risk for swarming. And this one was donated to us by Bearsville Bees in West Virginia. One of the newer hives systems on the market is the Parkinson hive. The beauty of the Parkinson hive is there's no need to lift or touch individual frames because, as you can see in the top right corner, they use frame holders that go around the frames, and you're lifting up the frame holder rather than the frame itself. You can use Langstroth, Top Bar, or Flow frames because the frame holders are designed to fit all of these individual systems because they're adaptable. You can move the bottom entrance. So if you can start the bottom entrance at the very bottom of the slant, and once your bees get established, you can move the entrance to the middle of the hive, and that way you can have the brood on the right side of the bottom entrance and the honey on the left side. It's open on the bottom, which allows for airflow. It does adapt to foam inserts for winterization. The slanted design is natural for bees because they have a hard time in Langstroth moving up when they're clustered together. So the slanted design is believed to allow the bees to move up and to the left at the same time. So they're moving the cluster in a less of a distance. The cons, again, with some of these accessible options is this one is very limited on mentors. So you must be a part of social media. There are no vendors that build the Parkinson hive. So you have to go on Facebook and join the group and download the plans, and it must be built. And as a limitation with a lot of these accessible options is that it's a fixed size. So now that we've talked about some of the accessible options, how do we design an apiary for accessibility? It goes into planning, a support team, parking and pathways, apiary, and then the facilities that you need to be able to support those with disabilities. So one thing that you want to do if you're planning to build an accessible apiary is to reach out to the public to gauge interest in an accessible apiary, and if there are certain designs that you need, such as people with wheelchairs or special accommodations that are needed. You have a need for a support team. Does your accessible apiary require access to medical professionals, or does your apiary require access to personnel support that can help move things around or steady people? Parking, you should try to make sure that your accessible apiary is in close proximity to parking and that pathways are wheelchair accessible. The grass or dirt can be manageable if it has not rained or snowed or anything by power chairs, but you might need to do manuals or pavers for manual wheelchairs that might have trouble going over some of the rougher terrain. A lot of apiaries that I've seen and worked with are in remote areas away from medical support. So when you start to design your accessible apiary, whether it's just for yourself or if you want to use it for teaching, you need to think about the soil types. Is it soft? Is it hard clay or is it softer dirt? Um, do you need flat, compact surfaces such as wood, concrete, rubber, weed exclusion cloths? Are there any tripping hazards such as rocks? What kind of hive stands do you need, and different hive solutions that might benefit your accessible apiary? Um, the apiary, the clearance between the hives. For example, do you need 5 feet in all cardinal directions? Do you need EpiPens, Band-Aids, antiseptics, cooling cloth? These are all important if you are doing a more public apiary for accessibility reasons. Does your apiary need to be ADA compliant? This is more United States based, but are you using this to train people or are you using this for personal? Do you need restrooms, water availability? Anybody who has a disability knows what the heat can do to your body. So do you have shade? Do you have seating available for somebody that might have a limitation in the amount of time that they can spend beekeeping? So let's apply our designs to an accessible apiary. Wheelchair accessibility, the average wheelchair is 23 to 26 inches. I'm not sure what the centimeters conversion is for you guys in the United Kingdom, but the wheelchairs need to be able to navigate through the hive. They need to have enough space to turn around. And is the height of the hive easy for access for the beekeeper to access the hive or access the hive? Sorry. You need to once again consider the terrain. Do you need pavers, or are you doing it so that only powered wheelchairs can access it? No one ever wants to be the one to knock over a beehive. I feel like the bees would be very angry about that. So persons with TBIs and other physical limitations may have balance issues, and you don't only want to have the hive spaced apart for wheelchair accessibility, but they should be spaced accordingly in case of an accident. And this is not only on your discretion, but the beekeeper should be made aware that they have to practice safe movements and use assistive devices themselves, such as canes, walkers, or anything that allows them to be stable. There are a few available accessible accessories on the market. Some of the accessible options are a bucket bench pail holder. If you ever tried to fill a 5-gallon bucket with honey and tried to move it into a different, this one allows you to hold the bucket at a 45-degree angle, so it puts less stress on the body. If you've ever tried to uncap a honey super, you know that it can be a lot of dexterity for somebody with less hand functionality. So they do have electric heated uncapping knives on the market that makes that simpler. One of the things that I love and I'm hoping to get for the apiary is the Lyson tilting extractor. It's designed with wheelchair users in mind. It's 8-frame adapted extractor, which means it can do 4 deeps or 8 mediums. It does tilt 45 degrees. But like I mentioned earlier in the talk, the price is out of the reach of most generalized public at $1,600 US dollars. So how is beekeeping made accessible currently? We had a podcast that I'm hoping to start now that I've made my move. There's Franklin's Beekeeping with Disabilities blog. We have a blind beekeeper in the United States, deaf beekeeper. There's some physical limitations like Charcot-Marie tooth disorder, which affects your nerves in the United States. I have a speaker from the UK who has cerebral palsy and a stroke. There's someone in the United States that I spoke with who's also my co-host who has spina bifida. And there is issues with damage to the brain, such as TBIs, PTSD, anxiety, etc. If for blind beekeepers, we have two vision impaired beekeepers on the podcast. They use sound, smell, and feel to inspect the hive. They do not use gloves because it takes away from one of their heightened senses, such as touch. And what they were doing was taking pictures with iPhone and sending to the mentor to find brood status, which is why I started developing the Be My Hive Inspector that we talked about in the beginning of this talk. If you are deaf, losing any sense can remove valuable information. Studies have been done on the acoustics of the hive, and the monitoring devices are being developed internationally to help interpret the acoustics of your hive. Some of the things that are on the market for colony monitoring is Bee Health Guru, which uses crowdsourced citizen science to redefine detection models. Bee Health Guru in the UK claims to detect 6 maladies such as mites, queenless, small hive beetles, etc. And then the BuzzBox Mini has been developed in the United States that uses the acoustics of the hive to tell if there's a queenless, if they're angry, if they are full, if they're about to swarm. The acoustics that the honeybees are giving off tells a lot about the hive, and being deaf, that takes away from you. We've talked about physical limitations, maneuvering around the hive, accessing the hive, the terrain for if you're in a wheelchair. If you have damage or lack of strength in your back or extremities, you might have issues with weight, endurance, gripping. There's balance issues. And how are some of the ways that people are overcoming limitations? They're using transfer boxes. If you don't know what a transfer box is, you take an empty box to your hive, you pull out all of the frames from that top box, put it into the transfer box, and then you're left with an empty box. And you pull that off, and then you go through your hive. Instead of lifting heavy boxes, you're lifting one frame at a time, and you have an empty box that you put into. We talked about the different hive types. Make sure that you take rest breaks and think about what is a manageable apiary for you. Do not go and start a 15 hive apiary if your limitation is only going to be 5. Some of the thoughts about that. Whether physical or mental issues, whether they're physical or mental, issues with our brains affect how we interact with others, feel, and deal with daily life. Some of the things that studies have been done show that beekeeping, being structured, being able to determine your own schedules, and it gives you a sense of accomplishment, which is important for somebody with a brain injury to be able to feel like they accomplished something and get lost in the apiary itself. Some of the nonprofits in the United States is Hives for Heroes, Heroes to Hives, Bees for Vets, Mission Believe. There's many nonprofits that are made for veterans, and one of the reasons that I started Accessible Beekeeping is there were not a lot of nonprofits for the general public. So the Accessible Beekeeping is for the general public. It also extends to veterans, but it also plans to help the aging beekeeper, the injured beekeeper, etc. We were excited to partner with Bees Abroad on this talk. They are UK registered charity with projects in Africa, which I think is fantastic that they are reaching out to other countries and doing the work that I can't do and that I'm working on doing in the United States. And that is the end of my talk, and I'm very happy that I was given this opportunity, and thank you, Katerina and Nikki, for being here, and everyone that came for the talk. I appreciate you.
Justin, thank you very, very much. This was very, very interesting. It was nice to see also the different types of hives that you're testing out, and I would like to later on ask a few more questions as well on that. I would like to just very quickly take 5 minutes to share a little bit more on the Bees Abroad overall work. And then I would like us to go to the Q&A session. If anyone has questions, do feel free to put them in the chat. And Nikki will also help us with the questions to Justin. So if I just quickly take over. . So as you know, today we've brought Justin Ruger, who kindly is sharing with us his journey within beekeeping and making beekeeping more inclusive. This is really just a part of a bigger awareness campaign and campaign that we're doing as Bees Abroad. The theme is This Beekeeper Can, and this theme is specifically about beekeepers that are either with disabilities or there are marginalized communities. We're currently working with communities that are disadvantaged, especially within the beekeeping world. In Kenya, Uganda, in Tanzania, we've got work in Sierra Leone, we've got Nigeria and Ghana. And we work very similarly to Justin with individuals that are disabled either physically or living with a long-term illness such as albinism. What you see here, the picture is a group in Sierra Leone who are, they're single leg amputees just after the war. And we're currently working with them on finding ways to make beekeeping with top bar hives accessible. So what we're doing is we've got the Big Give campaign starting today for 7 days. If you donate, of course, the donation gets doubled, but also each day there's a prize that our kind prize donors have given away. And so each day that you donate, you go into a prize draw for one of these prizes. And finally, I just wanted to also say a big thank you before I finish to everyone that has already donated as part of this talk. And a big thank you also to Justin before we go to the Q&A, personal from me, because your story is not just, inspiring, it's actually very encouraging to see someone taking on such a big task for something that doesn't really exist just yet, you know? So we're gonna get there and we're gonna get more beekeepers within our community. So thank you, Justin, for being here with us.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me and all the work that you're doing overseas.
Well, I think now what I'll do is I'll pass on to Nikki, who will help us with any questions that have come through. And of course, again, you know, we can have a little discussion before we finish tonight.
Fantastic. Well, first off, Justin, that was amazing. Thank you so much. I personally am absolutely in love with the Be My Hive Inspector and all that has to offer. I think that is just an amazing use of AI and has my interest. So to start it off, we have Rachel who wanted to know, is the children's book available in the UK and where can we purchase it?
Through Amazon. So
Okay,
if you purchase it through Amazon, they I think it's the UK Amazon, they will ship it directly to your house.
Okay. So hopefully that answers that one for you, Rachel. Check out Amazon. I wanted to know myself, how does the horizontal hive tilt initially? Does it require an able-bodied person to tilt it up and tilt it back down, or is that also something that can be done from a disadvantaged position?
So the way that it works is we use 2 boat swivel seats that tilt and lock. At first it was necessary to have an able beekeeper there because there was no stopper in it. And that was one of when I was saying that we get these hives and we talk about modifications that could be done with it. There was no stopper in it. So the beekeeper, if the upper body was strong enough, could pull up to it and unlatch the post. And if they're strong enough, lower it down and lock it back in on the sides of the hive. But if you accidentally let go, it just kept swinging. It just swung.
Right, yeah.
So one of the modifications that we sent to the company that designed the hive was that, hey, we need a stopper in there to make sure that if something happens or if a grass was lost or for whatever reason, the hive only went so far down before it stopped itself.
Amazing. Awesome. Okay. Are you accepting images or input for the Be My Hive Inspector? If so, how does one submit anything for you to put in your database?
I'm accepting all images of bromites, eggs, larvae, queen, anything that you think is important for hive inspections.
How would one go about
So
submitting that? Yeah.
you can, if you have Google or iCloud, you can put it all in a folder and then send the link to my to the nonprofit web email, which is jruger, RUGER, at accessiblebeekeeping.org.
Fantastic. Also, what medical precautions can you talk about? Specifically, are there issues with using medications for sting and allergies for reactions, i.e. EpiPens?
I'm not a medical professional, so I don't feel comfortable discussing that. I would be more comfortable with you discussing that with your doctor before you do something like that or take that precaution.
Fantastic. Fair enough, too. I mean, every different ability person has, different things that they will react well or negatively to. So that really does just rely on what's going on with that specific person. So
Mhm.
yeah. Okay. And then finally, Rachel wanted to know where the best place is to start with knowing what equipment to get first when you're dealing with differently abled beekeepers.
In the talk, I said that one of the best things to do is put out a feeler into the community that you're trying to teach and see what their disabilities are for those that are interested. Because a top bar hive can be raised or lowered by the length of the legs. A horizontal hive can do the same thing. I would suggest putting feelers out into the community to be able to tell what you need. It's not a bad idea to have a Langstroth hive and a horizontal Langstroth or a top bar hive because the a wheelchair can roll up to it, and you just want to make sure that they're spread apart enough that a wheelchair could maneuver around it.
Okay, great.
And one of the things that we made sure to do with the horizontal hive was that when it tilts towards you, you're working from the back of the hive.
Yeah.
So the lid lifts up, and you're working from the back of the hive. So the entrance and the bees are flying from the opposite end, the opposite way.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay. Gino wants to know, would you advise to a community bee club to begin transforming their teachings and apiary to be accessible and supporting members with disability? And how best do you think you could lead them in that direction?
I will always say yes to that question because the hardest thing about it is, and I gave a talk in Virginia at their state meeting, and I had 5 people come to it. And one of the things that they told me and that I realized was accessibility is not big on people's mind until they need it.
Right.
So you don't think about needing an accessible apiary until you become that older beekeeper, or you have that car accident, or you have that stroke. And if you set things in place to make that transition before you need it, then you are ahead of the game already.
Fantastic.
So the best way I think to go about it is start with a horizontal hive, or start with a top bar hive, and learn see what kind of people come out, like see what disabilities come out. And if somebody comes to you and says, hey, I want to be a beekeeper, and the hive systems that you have don't work with them, don't work with their disability, then you have the option to grow your apiary with one more hive. But if you can get a top bar hive and a horizontal Langstroth and a Langstroth hive, those are the 3 major accessible options on the market. I would also recommend a Slovenian AZ hive, but they are pricey. But they're, for me, that's just it's a cool hive. But
Yeah.
if you were trying to set up a local club hive or apiary and you wanted to save money and do the best you can to make your apiary accessible as well, I would go with one of the horizontal hives. And then if you have the extra money, look into the Aja AZ hive.
Okay. That kind of segues into my next question. What is your favorite hive to use?
The tilting horizontal.
The tilting horizontal. Do you know of any other types of prototypes that are in the works?
Not that I know of. There was one in Kentucky years ago, but I tried to reach out to him, and it feels like the gentleman that designed it fell off the face of the earth.
You'll have that.
'Cause
So have you been able to incorporate using hive sensors in any of the hives?
Not yet. That was my goal for the next year.
Nice, yeah. And let's see. Finally, I've got one from Anthony. How have you incorporated accessibility options into your beekeeping efforts abroad, or have you been able to do that?
The way that I've done abroad is I've done my podcast, and I've had people come on the podcast from the UK and from Scotland, and they come in and they talk about how they keep bees, and that allows somebody in the UK to say, hey, this person is in the UK keeping bees and I can too. And then my next step is to work with Bees Abroad and see what we can do to help those in Africa.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and maybe if I answer it also for Bees Abroad, working with individuals like the single leg amputees that are physically disabled in that sense. We currently have a project running together with a partner in Sierra Leone, where we are adjusting stands and again, adjusting the height primarily also, and the accessibility to the top bar, because we don't have two hands, you know, we've got to have, we're working on a two-person procedure that can allow them to group up and manage hives. But also we have a project currently in Rwanda with the hearing impaired. It's with a school. It's a school for the deaf. And we have trained the teachers of the deaf students to use sign language and to have their own apiary to train the students in beekeeping. In that sense, there's of course a lot of emphasis on the visual, but having teachers who speak the sign language has been a huge help for us, and being able to mentor and support them in that sense has helped us with that project as well.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've also seen this, Justin, but the impact, it's much bigger in these communities, is much bigger than just money or making honey. It's in fact what we've seen, at least with the students that graduate from the school and go back to their villages, and they have their own hives or their own apiaries, which we help them set up. It's of course that confidence again, that capacity to be part of a community and do something on your own. And I'm sure you've seen that well with people you work with.
Yeah, I think that's why the 1919 manual was so powerful to me, is because it gave the veterans that came back from World War I the chance to be a part of the community again and make a life for themselves and benefit the United States as a whole, which was their community.
And we have seen it also in the UK, a very similar thing to what you're describing, especially for those with PTSD. I think it's one of those things where it kind of encourages mental well-being as well through the meditation effect almost of the beekeeping activity, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. We do have a question. Someone's asking, what is the name of your podcast?
It's in
I
the,
posted
he answered it, I'm sorry, he answered it in the chat, but go ahead.
Oh, I
Justin.
see.
it's Accessible Beekeeping and More if you search it on the YouTube search.
Is it on YouTube? Is it also on something like Spotify? Or it's mostly YouTube?
It's on YouTube because it's video podcast. I did have it on Spotify and stuff, but it was too expensive to keep. I didn't have the money to keep it on listening podcast.
Okay. No problem. I think we've got one more person here, Bryce. That would be great. I think at some point, if you connect with him, he's saying, with my situation, I'm starting. He's also with disability. He's advising other people on beekeeping, and the British Beekeeping Association have put a few people in touch with him to talk about beekeeping with disabilities. So I wonder whether we can connect Bryce and yourself, Justin, for further collaboration, actually.
Yeah, Bryce can reach out to me on the nonprofit website, and if the you said this, the British Beekeepers Association, yeah, if they need someone to come and give a talk or would like someone to give a sounding board on what we're doing in the United States, I would love to be a part of that.
That's great. I think, yeah, Anthony. Thank you, Anthony. I just wanted to also say thank you, Justin, once more, and to everyone that has joined today. I hope I speak for everyone, but this was really interesting and insightful, and actually with a lot of practical advice on, you know, if the different associations that there are around the world, or from the people that have joined, if they're looking at setting up an apiary that also is inclusive. I think your presentation has given us a lot of ideas and food for thought. So thank you once again, and thank you for everything you're doing in the US.
Thank you for everything you're doing abroad.
So thank you again, everyone, and good night.
It's only 2:30 here.
Yes. Good afternoon.
Well,
Thank you, Justin. It was amazing.
Thank you so much.
This was a great talk.
Fantastic.
I appreciate the opportunity.